They called him the Underground Emperor. He locked up 6 girls for 869 days. 2 tried to resist. He took their lives and hid their bodies there. The other 4 didn't fight back. They turned on each other instead. His wife had no idea until he was arrested. How did these girls end up there? Why didn't they escape? This case shocked the nation. What dark secrets does it hide? One night in 2011, a call to the police broke the silence. On the line, a woman was crying, begging for help. She'd made the call while being forced out to work as a prostitute. She called herself Xiaoqing. She said a man had held her captive for 2 years. Even worse, she wasn't alone. 5 other girls were trapped with her in the cellar. At least 2 of them were already dead. The police realized this wasn't just a missing person case. It was a horrifying crime with lives at stake. They launched an urgent operation to find the cellar. The search led to an old, run-down building. Quiet, with no hint of the horrors inside. Following the clues, police finally tracked down a tiny basement. Less than 20 square meters, hidden and tightly sealed on all sides. At first glance, it just looked like a messy storage room, nothing out of the ordinary. But as they moved things around, they uncovered a glass door. Behind it was a dark opening, a void that felt like it led somewhere haunting. Just then, a man on a black motorcycle pulled up at the entrance, holding a child, quietly looking around. His face was tense, then he slipped away. This man was Li Hao. Knowing the police were closing in, he quickly stopped by his sisters to borrow some money, then disappeared into the night, starting his escape. As the police moved through the dark passage, they were shocked. This underground maze was more complex than they'd expected. To reach Li Hao's secret base, they had to pass through 2 tight tunnels. First, a 3.4-meter deep shaft, with an iron ladder going straight down. Then, a second passage, even narrower, 4.7 meters long and barely wide enough to crouch through. After that, they had to get past 7 iron doors, to reach a cellar 6 meters underground. As they stepped inside, a sudden voice stopped them. "Big brother, you're finally here." The voice was urgent, hopeful. But when she saw it was the police, not Li Hao, she froze. Seconds later, she realized what was happening, and broke down, sobbing, collapsing to the floor. Her body and mind seemed completely worn out, unable to take any more. This cellar was buried 6 meters underground. They had no way to reach the outside world. Even if they screamed, no one outside could hear. 7 iron doors blocked any way out. The cellar was only 4 square meters, at times holding up to 6 women. The space was split into 2 levels, the upper level for sleeping, where Li Hao often assaulted them, and the lower level served as a kitchen. At first, Li Hao occasionally brought food, but eventually, he only supplied a few tools, leaving them to cook for themselves. Despite having ventilation and air systems, the air was still damp and suffocating. The cold, damp environment, along with the sealed walls and iron doors, completely trapped them. Police found 4 survivors in the basement, all under 24 years old. 1 was from out of town, the other 3 were locals. During their search, police also found 2 bodies buried underground. The investigation showed that Li Hao had lured and held 6 victims over time. The case began in August 2009, when he started digging tunnels. 2 months later, he posed as a client and lured a woman into the basement, trapping her. In December 2009, he brought in an 18-year-old as his second victim. In December 2010, he lured in a 19-year-old as his third. In March 2011, a 20-year-old became his 4th victim. In May 2011, another young woman became the 5th. In July 2011, a 23-year-old became the 6th. Over 2 years, Li Hao used clubs and other venues to lure these women. He kept them in his basement as captives. To them, Li Hao was like a master, controlling every part of their lives. He decided their food and water, using a harsh system of rewards and punishments. Obedient victims got more food and better treatment. Those who resisted were punished. Since Li Hao worked during the day, he was often away from the basement. The victims frequently faced hunger, with barely enough food. Even when he occasionally brought food, he never let them eat enough to prevent them from having the strength to escape. If a victim disobeyed, he would punish her with violence. Those who behaved received rewards. He also used a divide and control strategy, having trained victims manage the newcomers, creating division and mistrust. If anyone reported another's escape plans, she would receive extra rewards and his approval. Because of this, some victims who had a chance to escape were betrayed by others and lost their chance. This control method turned the basement into a place full of suspicion and rivalry. In this harsh environment, the victims tried to please Lee Hao, just to survive a bit longer. Over time, things got even more complicated. At first, the victims tried to resist Lee Hao, but they soon realized their only option was to please him. Some even lost sight of who the real enemy was, turning instead to control others for Lee Hao's approval and a few extra privileges. They stopped seeing him as a threat. Instead, they started calling him boss, seeing him as someone to rely on. They even helped him dig out the rest of the basement. At first, only a third of it was finished. The rest was dug out by the victims themselves. They were, in effect, digging their own graves. To keep them occupied, Lee Hao would sometimes bring movies, music, and certain books for them to read. These books weren't random. They were carefully picked, including self-help books, positive thinking guides, and even strategy books. Though harmless on the surface, these materials were part of Lee Hao's manipulation, gradually trapping the victims in a mindset he created. Every time Lee Hao came down to the basement, the victims scrambled to please him. Over time, this turned twisted. They started competing against each other, trying to gain his attention. But not everyone went along. The first victim, Zhang Xingxian, tried to escape several times. After 10 months, she attempted to attack him when he was outside digging. She failed. Lee Hao was furious and decided to punish her severely. By then, a second victim, Duan, had arrived. She was loyal to Lee Hao. Following his orders, she helped him kill Zhang Xingxian and bury her body in a hidden corner. As more victims were brought in, Lee Hao began to see them as tools, not just captives. His plans got darker. He forced them to provide paid chats to strangers online. He set fixed rates for these chats and took all payments through online platforms. Some might wonder, what if one of the girls tried to ask for help online? Lee Hao had a plan for that. He strictly monitored each computer, controlling everything they could do. They could only follow his instructions. Anything else was blocked. As soon as the session ended, he disconnected the power and internet, cutting off all contact with the outside world. He made sure they had no chance to escape. In May 2011, Lee Hao kidnapped his fifth victim, a younger girl named Kai. He soon realized she was unwell and couldn't do the online sessions he demanded, so he decided to get rid of her. He hinted to the other victims, stirring up conflict to serve his own needs. Under his influence, Duan became one of her attackers. Duan beat Kai, cut her off from food and water, and forced her to do humiliating acts. Lee Hao ignored it all, letting it happen. After 2 months of abuse, Kai died from the mistreatment. Lee Hao and Duan buried her body next to Zhang Xingxian, trying to cover up what they'd done. Over time, with Lee Hao's constant control, some victims began to rely on him, and even defend him. They seemed to forget their suffering, and felt a twisted gratitude toward him. During the investigation, police were shocked to find that some victims tried to protect him and clear his name. So who was Lee Hao, really? How did he spend all day in the basement like a king, without anyone noticing? And why did his wife never ask questions, or wonder what he was up to? When this case happened, Lee Hao was just 34. He had been a firefighter, won skill awards, and knew how to use digging tools. In 2006, he left that job and took an office role in quality control, earning about 2,000 yuan a month. Lee Hao was always on time, kept things clean, and followed his routine. He was quiet, and coworkers saw him as just a regular guy. He lived in an old neighborhood, with no property management since 2008. Residents took care of things, but few paid much attention. This gave him opportunities. The guard, an older man named Hu, was the person Lee Hao interacted with most. Hu said the gate closed every night at midnight, but sometimes Lee Hao would return early in the morning and ask him to open it. Hu never saw him bring anyone in, but he noticed Lee Hao leaving early, with a bag that looked like dirt. When asked, Lee Hao claimed it was home renovation waste. No one thought twice about it. Lee Hao's wife was 10 years younger, a stay-at-home mom, and they had a son. Lee Hao told her he had 2 jobs, one part-time as a guard with odd hours. so she didn't question his whereabouts. To keep up the lie, he sometimes took money from home. This was one reason he forced the victims to do online shows. But the income wasn't steady and couldn't cover all expenses. Then he came up with a new plan, forcing the victims into prostitution for quick cash. This led to Xiaoqing's escape. She had only been held for 2 months, and Liao hadn't fully controlled her. She found an opening to escape and called the police. Liao was arrested, the truth came out, and the case shocked everyone. After Liao was sentenced to death, others involved, including Duan, were also sentenced as accomplices. Looking back at how the victims acted, there are clear signs of Stockholm Syndrome. Under intense fear and control, the victims developed emotional dependence on him. This phenomenon was first seen in a 1973 bank hostage situation in Stockholm, where hostages refused to press charges, and one even fell in love with the captor. The victims in Liao's basement went through a similar shift. In their desperation, they sought his approval and followed his orders. Alright, that's the end of today's story. Don't forget to subscribe and join the discussion in the comments. Your support helps us reveal more hidden truths.